G'day, H.M. Hari here. On a subject of people knowing themselves or not, identity, and not just people with BPD who often, untreated, do not know themselves, don't have a self, but people with codependency and this continued idea that, quote, I wouldn't be me if I didn't love him, unquote, or I wouldn't be me if I just, quote, abandon, unquote, him or her. And when people with codependency make those statements, something that I think is really important for people to realize is that you don't really know who you are, like in a full enough way, especially emotionally, and people have such a wounded inner child in each person with codependency who feels this way or makes these kind of statements because it's really how people are feeling, and people are really hurting with that. And it's repetition compulsions by people with codependency that is playing out what you went through in your childhood. And I know I've said this before, but it's so compelling that people with BPD, like, have you ever heard a person with BPD say to you, like I've been talking to clients recently in over 30 plus years, but a lot of people saying recently even that because they're on the outs or the off part of the perhaps off and on again relationship with somebody with BPD, and they'll say, well, but he or she said that they really can't be themselves with me. So that's what they're hearing people with BPD say, or each person's hearing someone with BPD say in this situation. And then people with codependency are like, but I really need this person. I love this person. It's the unhealthy bondedness of it all, and then some. So the codependent is not really knowing who he or she is and is sacrificing and abandoning self. And the person with BPD is saying, I can't be me around you. And the codependent's like, I can't be me without you. And then the guilt, the unhealthy guilt that comes in there. So one of the overlaps that I see a lot with client work is people with codependency, people with BPD, not in the same way, not driven, deep within a person's psychology or woundedness the same way between a codependent and a person with BPD, but it is this abdication of self on both sides of the equation. A little bit different reasons, a little bit different ways, but at the core of it, people with codependency are, just re-abandoning themselves in this unhealthy bondedness of the uber focus on someone who, in many instances and cases, isn't even talking to the person. The person with BPD isn't even communicating. Or they feel like because they so couldn't, quote, be me with you, like they so couldn't be themselves with you, they move on to the next person. Like in my video from earlier today, the monkey branching of it all, but it's even a little more complicated than monkey branching. Is a sort of effective way to a degree to describe what happens with a lot of people with BPD or even NPD, but it's very simplistic in terms of the complexity of what's happening in this love addiction, in this being in love with being in love, but there's no love there. And I'm not saying people with codependency don't love somewhat or considerably, or not all people with codependency are the same, but this overlap of loss of self in both cases, not that it's exactly the same. But so have you ever had a person with BPD say, I can't be me with you? Because what does that really mean? A person with BPD can't be them with anybody. Can't be, quote, me, unquote, with anybody unless there's somebody who doesn't understand what's happening, who's extremely codependent, which might be the next person that your BPDX moved on to at this moment. And then, so they're just being enabled, and they're just being sort of idealized in a way that isn't like BPD idealization, but somebody with codependency is thinking they're just the greatest. And it's like, yeah, the codependent position would be unconsciously, yeah, let me live through helping, enabling, mirroring, and rescuing you. Well, the person with BPD, in a sort of coded way, is saying, I need, give me. Yeah, I gotta have a lot more coming on these things because, I'm working with a lot of clients, and I mean, sometimes I'm drawing from clients from the past, over the last 30 years. Sometimes it's more recent, but keeping it general, of course. But it's incredible what's happening, I think, for people of all ages, in this not fit between codependency and borderline personality, in these relationships that are impossible, in the relationships in which neither person, to varying degrees, knows who they are or can stand for themselves. Some people with codependency can a little bit more than others, but neither the borderline, who doesn't know who they are, nor the codependent, who's lost a part of self to something in childhood, but also lost more of self, often in relating or staying in relationships with somebody with BPD. That self-abandonment is huge. And so if you're a codependent and you're still in this place, feeling like you're not being you because you're not giving enough to the person with BPD whose demands never stop, who you can't possibly satiate their needs, their demands, because they're not doing anything for themselves. And then when codependents externalize out that, unconsciously, right? But if you could put it in words, it would go something like, I'll do everything that you need for you. I'll do everything for you. And why is that exactly? Think about that again, maybe in a different way. Because if you're doing that, not that you would say that, not that it's conscious, but what does that mean for and I'll do everything for you, the person with BPD, the codependent is acting like, right? Is that's your emotional investment. That's that unhealthy bond and everything. But if you look at it sort of in reverse, why are you so prepared to do everything for that borderline? Meet all those demands, jump through all those hoops that are always moving, and try to rescue and try to fix, and you're never going to get it done, whether you realize that or not yet. So what's that say about how much pain you're trying to avoid in yourself? Or how really negatively you feel about yourself? And if that's the case, please know it doesn't mean that you are a, quote, bad, unquote, person, but it means you have a very active shame wound, among other wounds, from your childhood, where you are acting and giving and externalizing out to someone with BPD in a codependent, unhealthy relational pattern. You're acting as if you don't matter at all. But at the same time, what's underneath that for people with codependency is very much about, and when I do everything for you, for the borderline, I need back. I people with codependency have a wounded inner child, and there's reparation needed there, healing needed there. And people continue to believe that that's going to happen with a person with BPD or NPD. Cluster B. I don't mean any disrespect to anybody, but wow, I'd be skimming the surface to say it doesn't work like that. You are signing yourself up and continually, day by day, moment by moment, but but I have to help them. Oh, but he or she said, the borderline, or maybe a narcissist said, I can't really be me around you. And the codependent is saying, I wouldn't be being me if I don't abandon me for the borderline or the narcissist. Obviously not literally saying it, and not maybe consciously aware of it. I see so many people that I work with in such pain all day long. Not that they're all the same or anything. Some are making progress. Some are just in the beginning. Some are somewhere in the middle. But this denial of self, whether it comes from people with BPD or the really uber defended, only left false self in the narcissist, or whether it comes from the false self in the wounded codependent. I mean, I probably don't have to tell you how painful it is, but do you know why? Do you want to know more about why? Do you want to get off the roller coaster? Do you want to start to heal? Do you want to start to know yourself? Do you want to focus on yourself? Do you know that you're worth that? That you don't have to abandon yourself to try to give the ungivable that people with BPD or NPD don't even receive. The narcissists only take it in a supply, and that only lasts like a minute or two or a half hour or whatever. You deserve so much more. And if you're new to this, or you're just still actively involved in being uber focused on a person with BPD or NPD that is either ghosted you, or might be monkey branching you, or is not communicating, or in the younger generations right now, might also be in the older generations, but millennial into the next generation coming up, I guess Gen Z, not sure how old the oldest of them are, polyamory. Everything and anything, and I'm not here to judge that either, but the breakdown of relationships between especially millennials and the next generation, the breakdown of the ability on either side, because it's codependent cluster B, codependent cluster B, so often. Of course, that's what I'm going to see in my work with clients, right? More often than not. But if you have codependency, or even if you think you might have BPD, as I've seen more comments on my channel recently, people are going, oh my God, I think I have this. Well, first of all, don't be diagnosing others in an amateur fashion, and don't self-diagnose yourself either. Because a lot of people with codependency, there's a lot going on there besides the codependency, but often, and you're in a world of hurt, but and you're abandoning yourself, but it doesn't mean necessarily, therefore, you have BPD. You know, some people can have both, obviously, but when you're over your limits and boundaries in these relationships, limits and boundaries you may not even have identified for yourself, and I say that with compassion. Why? Because in the childhoods of codependence lie the reasons and the woundedness that you're doing what you're doing today, that you're in the pain that you're in today, that gets exacerbated by the cluster B, but it isn't all about the cluster B. So people with codependency, I hope that gives you some food for thought today. That you know, and I'm out here to work with you if I resonate with you, but this is getting more, it's ramping up exponentially in culture for all kinds of reasons I won't go on about in this video. But there are more people lost in codependency, probably now more than ever, in what we now know and understand so much more about codependency, as in the roots to this love addiction, to this, which is not love, to this draw to these unhealthy unhealthy bonds. And it's to everybody's detriment. Nobody is helping anybody. People with BPD aren't really trying to help anybody. They're just so lost in trying to find themselves, or trying to get, out of their pain, have you help them get out of their pain, and then resent you for it, and say they can't be themselves around you because maybe you're not so cool with everything they're doing. And then people with codependency are like, but I wouldn't be me, because I've heard this a lot recently, so I'm not going back to a commenter on the channel. I wouldn't be being me if I didn't care about him or her. I wouldn't be me. And in the meantime, these people are in tears, are in agony, are hurting, have other things going on in their lives, especially maybe some younger people that are still in university, and they have assignments, and if they're going for a degree, they have a thesis to do, and many of them can't get it done because they can't stop the focus on the cluster B, who knowingly or unknowingly, defensively all about themselves, and gimme, 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 gimme is the mantra of the borderline in so many different ways. Not that they will just say that. And it's because of their, woundedness, etc. But people with codependency have to wake up to this for your own sake. What about you? Because codependency is the externalization out to rescue, help, and try to fix and get all involved and focused on other, so that you don't have to look at yourself, so that you don't have to feel your own pain. But guess what? Every minute of every day that you focus on the cluster B X or the person you're with right now still, but the good times are so good, well, the cognitive dissonance, you're not realizing that the abandonment of yourself, and you are increasing your pain exponentially every minute, every day, every time you go back to the X with BPD, or you stay in the relationship on and off, and you listen to them say, but I can't be me around you. Well, you're abandoning yourself to give them everything of you and then some. It's such a recipe for agony. And here comes the really tough love part. For people with codependency and for people with BPD, who in each position, and difficulty and challenges in life, don't realize on a conscious level that you're now the person choosing to suffer more instead of getting into a healing recovery process. Or I work with some people who are at ground zero with that, and people have to start where they're at. But then resisting the process and still focusing on the cluster B. So ask yourself today, if this resonates with you, what's it going to take for you to start to care about you? What's it going to take for you to want to look at what happened to you in your childhood, clear out that past? And yes, these are painful processes, but how can you lean into that pain today? And how can you continue to, work with someone like myself if I resonate you, or work with someone and really be doggedly determined to know more about you and what happened to you and why you have this dysfunctional, unhealthy relationship to and with yourself, and why maybe in an unconscious way you keep choosing to make that worse for yourself. You keep abandoning yourself because you think the externalization out to the person with BPD or NPD is going to somehow one day come back and fix you. No, it is the fixated repetition compulsion of what happened with a parent that keeps you hooked in to the unhealthy bond with the cluster B. And I know a lot of people probably already know that up here, but it's time to get knowing it in your emotional landscape. It's time to put you first, and I'm serious. I feel really passionate right now because I'm in the middle of working with clients today, and I have several more clients, and I've worked with several already, and this has been a theme today. Some days are full of themes that are similar from one client to the next. Some days aren't like that at all. It's like all over the map. But the theme in codependency is that if I rescue other, which is controlling, by the way, because you don't want to deal with yourself. If I rescue other, they'll rescue me. Absolutely never happens. So please keep thinking about, if you're not working with somebody, if you resonate with me, book some sessions. Let's go. Let's help you. Because what about you? You need to start seeing you. Not through the lens of the wounded inner child, family of origin, unself-differentiated, not through the lens of the cluster B or in relation to the cluster B. What the heck about you? And it's not true that people with codependency, well, I wouldn't be being me if I did this or that. How do you know that? I really, genuinely, with empathy and compassion for you, say, and I mean it tenderly, how would you even know what being you really means in terms of how you're sacrificing and abandoning yourself? So I hope this was helpful for someone. I hope it resonates. I hope it gives food for thought. You know, I work with clients all day, 5 days a week minimum, sometimes the odd weekend too. I see so much of this, and this is what informs a lot of the videos that I do, and the reasons why sometimes there'll be a bit of a tough love, but meaning to be tender, non-judgmental, compassionate sort of challenge to you. Because you deserve to get focusing on yourself if you have codependency. And people with BPD deserve to get into treatment to be able to get out of their agony too. But a codependent is not going to help a borderline, and a borderline is certainly not going to help a person with codependency. Take care.